Welcome to Village Church. My name is Josh Rouse, part of the leadership team here at Village, and we're ecstatic that you have chosen to spend your hour 10 with us this morning. We are starting a brand new series this morning. If you're new to Village, congratulations. You got here on a good day as we start the first week of this series we're calling YouTube. That we want to try to figure out how to live like we're on camera. Because in 21st century American life, there's a great chance you might be, right? That you might be on camera. So we want to try to figure that out over the next month because it's a fascinating day we live in where everything tends to be recorded. In fact, YouTube's slogan, of course, is broadcast yourself. And some of us even maybe have been taken advantage of in terms of broadcasted by somebody, right? Like they broadcasted me that you might not even know, like those poor jokers right there on the title package. As a sports fan, I became aware of this whole idea that everybody's always watching. It's probably about 12 years ago when I remember the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones, he was filmed at a bar. He was hanging out with a guy, and Jerry had one too many Kool-Aids, and Jerry just started talking. And he was talking about players, he was talking about coaches, he was talking about what he thought about referees, about the NFL, about this and about that. And he didn't realize that the guy there with him is recording him. And the next night, all over SportsCenter was Jerry Jones just talking about this, that, and the other. And for the first time, I remember thinking, oh, wow. This is a different kind of age we're living in where cameras are so readily available, you can just be recorded just talking. And that happened with Jerry Jones. There's another time that I remember there was a guy named Mark Sanchez who was quarterback of the New York Jets. And Mark Sanchez was caught on the sidelines eating a hot dog during the game that he was actually playing in. And it was a big deal because apparently you're not supposed to eat hot dogs if you're playing football. I don't know why that's a big deal. I watch football all the time, and there's some guys that look like they've been eating way too many hot dogs based on the way they're playing, right? But for Mark Sanchez, he was caught on film eating a hot dog, and I think that later that week he came out with an apology. I'm so sorry for eating a hot dog, right? That it's like, oh, poor guy. But do you remember the old saying growing up when maybe your mom or your dad or your Sunday school teacher or your teacher or just somebody, maybe a coach who said this? They said that character is who you are when no one's looking, right? Do you remember that? Maybe you've heard that. Maybe you've used that. Well, it seems everybody's looking these days. Right? That there are very few places now where no one's looking. Those places tend to be non-existent these days. These places where no one's looking. We live in a culture of voyeurism. Right? We live in a culture like of peeping Toms. Right? That's who we are as people. How many of you watch reality shows? Oh man, look at there's no hands. Some of you are liars. Thank you, Carrie. This woman can be trusted. Remember last week we got Ryan was trustworthy. But we watch these reality shows. We're peeping on the lives of these people, right? We're being voyeurs just watching their lives. So how do you and I, in the midst of this culture where everybody's watching, whether you know it or not, how do we begin to live the call of Christ congruently in our lives? How do we begin to live lives that are integrated with who God has made us to be when the camera's on and when the camera's off? I can remember, I cut my teeth on student ministry. For the first 15 years or so of my ministry life. And loved hanging out with teenagers, loved being in their world, loved being a part of their lives. It was a good time. And I would hear, most of the time as senior adults, they would say, these kids today, they've got it so tough. And when I'd hear that at the time, I'd push back on that a little bit. I'm like, do they really? Like, I'm with these kids a lot. These kids have better shoes than I do. That kid drives a better car than I do. They dress better. They have better friends. I mean, do they really have it worse than when you did? As I get a little older, though, now I think I would agree with that statement, that our students today have it more difficult maybe than you and me. And the reason is that there's no margin for error for them, right? There's no margin for error. That if they screw up, there's a great chance that that night it's on Facebook. There's a great chance that that night somebody's tweeting about it. Somebody's recording it and it's on YouTube. Boom, all over the place. No margin for error. Because I made a lot of mistakes growing up. I think you probably made a lot of mistakes growing up. I think for most of us in this room, if some of the mistakes we made were filmed, we quite possibly aren't in the roles we are today. Right? I know I'm not sitting up in front of you if some of the things I did were on camera today. Right? I'll tell you that story later. But I know that. But I don't think there's margin for error for our students. Their mistakes are made. This is this new reality they're figuring out. Right? And, well, maybe we're figuring out. They just understand it. Right? That their mistakes are made loud and live and in stereo for a watching world. And I'm going to reference sports a few times today, so I'll go ahead and beg your forgiveness. But I've noticed this. I'm a baseball fan, and there have been some young pitchers, or actually young players this year in Major League Baseball, who they'd have a great moment. Like, in fact, there's a pitcher for the Braves who almost threw a no-hitter. And that night, some tweets, some posts he made online, highly offensive posts, were shared with the national media. Right? And it's like, oh, wow, this guy just had this great game, and now all this stuff he said has come out. And I'm thinking, wow, this is crazy, right? Because he was living his life on camera, whether he realized it or not. Not condoning what he said at all, but there was no margin of error, right, for this guy, these mistakes that he had made. I saw Will Smith, the Fresh Prince himself, a few years ago on a talk show. And the interviewer asked Mr. Smith, the Prince, they said, do you think that racism is more prevalent today than in the past? And it was fascinating listening to him talk about that answer, because we as a country were in a pretty rough stretch at that point, racially speaking. And Smith said this. He said, no. He said, I don't think it is more prevalent. He said, I don't think it is worse today than it was 50 years ago. He said, 50 years ago, it was much worse then than it is today. He said, I don't think it's worse today than it was 100 years ago, or even 150 years ago. But his next comment just blew me away. He said, I think what's happening today is it's being televised. Right? You're seeing it. And what seems like, and while, yes, there's a lot of it going on around, Smith would say that there's probably less of it, but you're seeing it. And it's blowing your mind, right, to see it on camera. And I would never have thought this, but in 1998, I probably, like some of you, saw a movie that was very prophetic. It was prescient about this kind of culture we live in, where everybody's on camera. And it happened to star the greatest actor alive at that time, Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey, who was starting to dip his feet into serious stuff. I grew up just loving to laugh at the guy. Made a movie called The Truman Show. Right? Maybe you've seen it. And The Truman Show was all about this guy who, from birth, in the preview it talks about, he was essentially adopted by a company. And what they did was there were cameras on him. They created his life. And it was for the whole world to see. It was called The Truman Show. His name was Truman, and everybody watched his show. And the whole thing is about him, whether his great days, his bad days, his awesome times, his terrible times, his relationships, his screw-ups, his wins. And the whole thing centered around him. And as the movie goes, he starts to figure out that he's on camera. And freedom for him is breaking out of the show. But it was such a fascinating thing back then, because you're like, science fiction, look at that stuff, right? But now, 20 years later, I think, wow, we're living in our own version of the Truman Show at times, aren't we? Because with YouTube and TMZ and the fact that you and I have video recorders on our phones that are in our pockets or purses, we have this culture we live in where every little bit of our lives can be, as YouTube advertises, broadcasted, right? Broadcasted. It's like we're all Jim Carrey in the Truman Show. And unfortunately, for so many in our culture, we don't realize this until it's too late, right? Because you and I, when it comes to this culture we live in, we're in need of wholeness, right? We're in need of integration. We're in need of our words and our actions matching. We're in need of there to be congruence in our lives there. We want to live a well-lived life, don't we? Because a well-lived life has massive ramifications, right? Massive ramifications. And in fact, a not well-lived life has massive ramifications as well. There are generational ramifications. There are influence ramifications when it comes to living well. And those influences, they can last for years to come. You and I, when it comes to this culture we find ourselves in, are in need of living with character, right? Of living with character. Character. Who you are when no one's looking. Character, as Dwight Moody once said, who you are in the dark. Right? Character is actually what you are in the dark. But what happens when everybody's looking and when the darkness is lit up? Right? Everywhere. What do? Well, we are in need of character. So our working definition over the next little month or so is going to be this. Character is just who you are. It's who you are. In the light, in the dark. When no one's looking, when everyone's looking. Right? While you're dancing down that grocery store aisle, while you're watching and laughing the person that is dancing in the grocery store aisle. That's who we are. It's our character at the very end of that. Basketball coach John Wooden, UCLA, great coach, he said, your character essentially is this. It's who you really are. It's who you really are. At the end of the day, it's who you are. And so as we talk about character over the next month, I want us to think a little deeper about character than maybe we normally would. Because some of us, maybe we hear character and we're like, yeah, just being good enough, right? Just being good enough. Oh, yeah, I'm good enough. That's good. Yeah, my mama loves me. She told me I was special, right? I'm good, right? That we're talking a little more about that than that. Like maybe you think character and you're like, oh, man, I've got good character. I ain't killed anybody. I don't steal. I don't lie all the time, right? I got good character. I don't drink, cuss, chew, go with girls who do. I don't do any of that. I'm pretty good. I even keep 6 out of 10 of the 10 commandments, right? 6 out of 10. Teachers, you know what 6 out of 10 is, right? Students, you know what 6 out of 10 is in school? It's not an A. Not an A. You can erase one of the legs of that A, and it's a big old F, isn't it? All right, it's not good. Not good. 6 out of 10, not good. But character is actually more than that. It's so much more than that, than just being good enough. It's about what's best for you and what's best for me, what's best for our children, what's best for our spouses, what's best for the people we work with, for the people we encounter every day, for the people we encounter at the Ingles checkout line. Character is about what is best. Because the bar isn't good enough, right? The bar isn't good enough. In fact, consider the 10 Commandments just for a minute. The 10 Commandments, if you're judging how you're doing as a human being on the 10 Commandments, that's really baseline morality that the Israelites were coming out of Egypt and had no idea how to function as a people, right? No idea. And God's like, okay, well, here are 10 things you should do. This is foundation. This is baseline, right? Brush your teeth. Call your mama. These sorts of things. Do well on these and you'll do good. That's baseline, though. It's baseline. There's a better standard. And we're going to mention that more here in just a minute when it comes to character. But have you noticed that every once in a while, you'll meet somebody, right? And there's just something different about them, right? Maybe it's that they listen to you, or maybe it's that when you talk to them, they always want to bring the conversation back around to you. Or maybe there's just something about them that you're like, I can't put my finger on it, but I love being around that person, right? That's this character that we're talking about. There's just being something wholly different about who we are. And it's interesting with the current state of our national soap opera that we live to consider what's even going on nationally. That you have elected officials who should be people of character trying to weigh out two people's character. Right? If you've been keeping up with the Supreme Court stuff, that's essentially what they're doing, because there's a lot going on there. And essentially you have these elected officials saying, believe, don't believe. Believe, don't believe. And it's a character thing they're trying to figure out. So over the next month, we're going to be talking about how can we be men and women and students of character. And so this morning, I want us to look at a proverb written by a guy named Solomon, who next to Jesus was the wisest, considered many by the wisest man who ever lived. And this verse comes out of Proverbs. It's this book written essentially to his son about these are things, son, if you will take these and do them, your life will be better off for them. Proverbs reads kind of like a greatest hits of Solomon's wisdom, right? It's like, play the hits, Solomon. All right, here's Proverbs, right? That's what it reads as. And so we're going to look at one of Solomon's Proverbs this morning that sounds kind of goofy to us as 21st century Americans. But Proverbs 22, verse 1 is where we're going to be. And Solomon says this in 22:1. He says, a good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold. A good name is more desirable than getting rich, than being wealthy, than having a lot of money, than having a lot of stuff. This sounds crazy in our American culture. This sounds crazy. This is nut bar talk. No, our culture would say, oh, that's great, that's great, that's great. But it's the wealthy who win. It's the rich who are rewarded, right? If you're rich, you can beat a murder charge, can't you? I mean, if you're rich, you could do anything. Good name, it's up there, but not as much as money. Right? It's easy to hear this with Solomon and think, this guy's lost his mind. He doesn't know what in the world he's talking about. Our culture will sell your mama for $1, won't we? Forsake all you can to gain riches and gold. Solomon seems like an out-of-touch doofus here. An out-of-touch doofus. How do we do stuff in America? Money, money, money. Solomon says, take another look, take another look, take another look. Because money, you know what's going to happen to it? Your money will run out. Or you'll die with it and somebody else will get to spend it. That's not fun. Your money will run out. Your status, who you think you might be, that's going to go away. Your fame will go away. Remember Andy Warhol? The artist said that we have 15 minutes of fame, right? 15 minutes. That's not long. That's not long. Your good looks, and y'all are pretty people this morning, but your good looks, they won't last. They won't. I was at a conference this week. I came home. I was only gone 2 days. My youngest son says, first thing he said to me, you look old. I said, great. Thanks. Go to your room. I was like, man, the conference did a number on me. Right? I mean, I have seen a few more gray hairs, Jonas, but dang. Your good looks won't last. Your athleticism, however great you think you are at that, it's not going to last. Right? It's not going anywhere. Our brains may even fail us. Solomon's saying a good name, that's better than all of it. Character, that's transcendent. That's next level stuff. Right? So today, I want to give you two big ideas regarding character, just kind of to jump us off into the rest of this series. All right, the first one's this, two big ideas regarding character. Character is a choice we make. Right? Character is a choice we make. Character is not something that happens by accident. When you meet that person, you're like, man, there's something about that person. I love that person. The person's good. There's something about that person. They didn't get that way on accident. Right? They didn't get that way on accident. That's something they had to work at. We looked at a passage from Hebrews last week where the author said that be careful not to be caught in the sin that so easily entangles. In other words, we can kind of fall into it. That's New Testament language too. You can fall into it, like accidentally, boom, there's sin. Character doesn't work like that. It takes work. We don't accidentally become men and women, students of character. There's cost associated with it. There's work involved, time involved, care involved. Character must be developed, right, over time. And just wanting to, that doesn't cut it either. Because I want to be the center fielder of the Atlanta Braves. I'm here with you this morning. Although the way they're swinging their bats in the playoffs, I could give it a shot. Just saying. Can we get a run? Changing my goals here. But just so much more than just wanting to. That character is kind of like exercise. The more you do it, the better you get at it, the more reps you get. And that our muscles, our moral muscles, our character muscles are built by doing the next right thing, and the next right thing, and the next right thing, and the next, and the next, and the next right thing, and the next right thing, so on and so forth. You know the most important decision you're going to make today? Most important one. It's not lunch. It's not whether or not to take a nap. It's not whether or not to watch my Falcons lose. The next decision you make, the most important one, is the next one. It's the next one. It's always the next one. You may have blown the one just a minute ago. We'll make the next one well, right? That's the most important decision you'll make, the next one. Right? A guy named N.T. Wright, that guy, I love reading N.T. Wright stuff. He says this about character. Character is a slowly forming thing. Right? Again, this is like reading another language for us in our culture of instant. It's a slowly forming thing. You can no more force character on someone than you can force a tree to produce fruit when it isn't ready to do so. The person has to choose again and again, and I'd say again and again, to develop the moral muscles and skills which will shape and form the fully flourishing character. And so just as long, steady program of physical training will enable you to do all kinds of things which you would previously never have thought possible. So the long, steady program of working on the character strengths, the virtues, will enable you to live in a way that you would never have thought possible, avoiding moral traps and pitfalls and exhibiting a genuine, flourishing human life. Character. We have to work at it. It's a choice we make. Because your character, my character, it's who we really, truly, authentically are. It's who you faux real are. You ever use faux real? You ever catch your kids using faux real? Like my kids, I'll say something, they'll be like, for real? I'm like, no, I was lying. Yes, for real. Right? I can't give them too hard a time because they've learned it from their father. Right? Beth will say something, I'll be like, for real? She'll be like, yeah, dummy, for real. No, she uses much nicer words for me. Yeah, slow guy. Yeah, faux real. Your character is your faux real self. At the end of the day, it's who you really are. And it impacts everything we do. What we accomplish, if you're worth investing in, if people want to be in relationship with you. Right? And some of us know because we've had relationships broken because of character issues, either ours or someone else's. It impacts everything we do. And whether you realize it or not, your character goes before you everywhere you go. When somebody says your name to a group of people, instantly they've formed an idea. Boom! Right? Josh, oh, that guy, right? Or Andrew, oh, that guy, double, or, no, Andrew, yeah, great, yeah, I love that guy, right? They've formed an image about you because your character goes before you. It's your publicist. It's in charge of all your PR. All right, your character's on the front end of things, doing some work for you, good or bad. Because while your competence and your charisma may have impressed people enough for you to get that job, it's your character. It's going to keep you showing up, doing the work, even when it's hard, over and over again, and you keeping that job. Right? While your good looks and suave personality might have gotten you married, it's your character that's going to keep you there. This makes me blush, but while your God-given reproductive system may enable you to produce kids, it's your character that's going to determine how you communicate with those kids, how you relate with those kids, how you lead those kids, how you parent those children. Character is a choice we make every day, right? To be that spouse, to be that worker, to be that parent every day. It's a choice we make. And character is also a direction we take, right? It's a direction we move in. Whether you realize it or not, we are always moving in a direction. And character is a lifelong process of taking our everyday, right, and refining it to be the people God has called us to be. Eugene Peterson is a pastor and wrote a book called A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. Right? And I love that image, a long obedience in the same direction. He's talking about faithfulness, but you might as well be talking about character. That's what character is, a long obedience in the same direction. I love sitting down with people in their 80s, people in their 90s, and them telling me how they've become the people they've become. Because they have chosen, for the most part, a long obedience in the same direction. And it's already happening to you and to me. It began the day we breathed our first. It's going to end the day we breathe our last. Right? This character of ours. And while it has everything to do with right now who you are, it also has everything to do with who you're becoming. Right? It's a directional thing. It's not so much where you are right now as it is where you're headed. Right? The decisions you're making today are creating tomorrow you. The decisions I made years ago have made this. Voila. Right? Like, you need to make better decisions. I know. That's what I'm trying to tell you. A guy named Aaron Rodgers, one of my favorite quarterbacks, said this, and this shows me he gets it. He gets this directional thing. He said, my character will last longer than my football career. Right? So that my football career, my job is this much of my life. But my character is all of it. Right? It's going to last longer than this. And it's interesting when we think about character, we think about it being a directional thing, that as we move and as we choose character, as we move in its direction, that we're going to meet people along the way. And I don't know about you, but I have some things I want from the people I meet. Right? It's kind of a list, kind of a qualifications. This is what I expect of you when we meet. I expect, and I think you expect, trustworthiness from people, honesty, self-control, faithfulness, patience. Maybe you expect people to be kind to you, to be loving to you. And that's great to expect that of other people, especially when we're moving in the direction of character. But if we expect that of them, we've got to be those things. Right? If we expect someone to be a certain way, then we have to meet that standard as well. The only way we surround ourselves with people like that, of those qualities, of those traits, is that we begin to own those. We begin to exercise those in our daily lives. Being loving, being faithful, being trustworthy, right? Being a kind person, being patient. Pastor Andy Stanley, we took our youth group years ago to an event, and he was there that week talking to, sharing the messages with the kids. And that night was on dating, it's always interesting for a youth pastor when you're talking dating and you got the couple in the front row that won't stop holding hands. Like, oh, this is going to be good, right? Just let them have it, Andy. And Andy said this. He said, you must be the person you're looking for is looking for. All right? And I thought it's great dating advice, but it's also just great character advice. The things you want in other people, do you have them? Do you have them? Are we what we want from them? All right? Are we what we want from them? Do you want trustworthiness? Am I it? Am I trustworthy? Students, do you want friends that won't backstab you? Well, are you a backstabber? Are you running them down? Or do we want people in our lives that are loving? Well, are we being loving? Are we being patient? All right? Are we that for them? And that's going to involve us choosing and then walking in a direction. C.S. Lewis said that character is the will to do what is right as defined by God, regardless of personal cost. Because that's it. It's going to cost. It's going to be hard. We got to move. We got to choose, and we've got to move. Solomon said, a good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold. A good name. Because, and you've maybe experienced this too, when we choose to lean in the direction of integrity and of character, of being the people that God's called us to be, we'll often find that character isn't produced in us to be enjoyed by us, is it? It's not something that happens and you just, at the end of the day, hey, I'm Josh, I've got good character. Wink. That's not what it's for, is it? That it's a others-centered thing, isn't it? Right? It's not about doing what's easy for me, what's good for me, what comes natural to me, what makes me feel good. It's about growing something in me that is good for others, isn't it? Not vice versa. See, and that's the standard. That's the best. Is being conformed. And this is Jesus stuff. Being conformed to Christ's image. Being conformed to look more like Him. Especially for those of us that are Christ followers in the room. That's always our goal. That's always the measurement of our character. It's not the person in the mirror. It's not our spouse. It's not the people at work. It's always Jesus. It's always Him. And see, this communicates so loudly to a watching world, to a YouTube culture, our own personal Truman Show. Because very few people look at Jesus and think, that Jesus, he is such a drag. Ugh. Don't want him showing up. Jesus. Oh, don't tell me about Jesus. Right? I bet he would be awful to be around. Right? That Jesus cat. He'd probably take advantage of me, or he'd probably lie to me. He would probably make me uncomfortable or treat me poorly. That Jesus guy. See, very few people think about Jesus like that. Have you noticed that? Any conversations you may be having out and about? Most people generally like Jesus. They struggle with his followers, probably deservingly so, but they like Jesus. Do you know why? It's because of his character. It's because of his character. Read the Gospels. Watch Jesus interact with a tax collector in 1 minute, like the scum of the earth, a tax collector. Watch him the next minute interact with a religious zealot, right? In the same breath, he's having these great conversations with these folks, and they tended to enjoy Jesus. They recognize his authenticity, his faux realness, right? They recognize him, that there's something incredibly attractive about him. He was who he said he was, and he did what he said he'd do, and the same is true today. That a watching world looks for this character of Jesus still, whether they acknowledge it or not. They long to be around people like Jesus. People who care, people who are trustworthy, people who are kind, people who are faithful, people who love unconditionally, people who are honest, people who are selfless, people of character, people with good names. Solomon was right. A great name, a good name is more desirable than these things. And if you're sitting here this morning and saying, man, character, I'm in. And you haven't considered Jesus, that if you want character, what you want is Christ. Right? That you want that in your life, the steadying presence of Jesus. But you and I have to uncompromisingly choose character and move in the direction of character. So over the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about what it looks like to be people of character in a world where every camera is ready and pointed and aimed in our direction. To say, okay, well, this person, saw what they did there, or you saw what they did there. Right? To prove that there's a lack of integrity. There's a lack of congruity in our lives. So this week, as we go about trying to be men, women, and students of character, I would encourage you to weigh yourself. Not literally, I'm coming off a birthday week. It's going to be sad if I did that. Weigh yourself metaphorically. Weigh every thought. Weigh every decision. Weigh the motives behind those thoughts and decisions. Ask God, why do I do that? Why do I do this? Why do I do that? Because character, crazy thing about it, it's not just about what we do, it's about why we do. Right? I used to think that was the religious life, that to be a good boy meant just doing what I was supposed to do. But then as I read Jesus and I experience Jesus and other people, it's so much more than that. It's more about the why I do. And that gets far deeper into who I am. So this week, may you pray for Jesus' character to be formed in you. Follow Jesus. And this sounds heretical, but let me explain. Don't be satisfied with heaven. Right? Because for some of us, we live try to live this Jesus life, and at the end of the day, we're like, oh, but heaven's coming, right? and we're not finding satisfaction right here with who Jesus is in our lives today. All right, don't be satisfied with heaven. Find satisfaction in being the men, women, and students that God's calling you to be right here. Doing as he did in your daily routine. Allowing his character to be formed and forged in you. Because we live in a YouTube culture. And we live in a YouTube culture that will convince you that even striving to be people of character, that you're going to fail, right? And that you have to be perfect and not fail is a lie that culture will try to tell you. You have to always be perfect, right? Always do it right. That's a lie. That's a lie. Because let me tell you something. This side of Jesus, ain't none of us perfect. Right? Excuse the slang. None of us are perfect. You don't have to be perfect. But when you choose character and when you move in its direction, you'll find that when you fail, that you will be a person who lives humility, who lives grace. And when you need those things from others, that as you live humbly and as you live gracefully, you can find that from others. Character will produce that in us so that we can then share that with other people. Right? So this week, start asking the why questions. It's not so much about the what I'm doing, but why am I doing this? How is my character being formed? Who am I to the people around me? Right? And let's pursue character. And as we do, let's pursue Christ as well. Let's pray together.